It is time for another edition of the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, I am Jason Floyd. I'll be joined by the fighter Pete Rogers Jr. as we're going to break down UFC Noche, which goes down here on Saturday in the Spear in Las Vegas. Of course, headlined by the bantamweight title fight between Sugar Sean O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili. And then, of course, the co-main event trilogy matchup as Alexa Grasso defends her title against Valentina Shevchenko. Pete, how's it going, man?
What's going on, Jason Floyd? The best in the business. Not much on this end. I'm excited, even though it's a short card. I'm excited to see what the UFC has in store. I'm not expecting anything like spectacular, like when they had, like Aaron Lewis and all these artists perform. I'm just interested to see what's going on because apparently they're spending a boatload of money to make this thing happen. But as far as like fights on the card, I expected there to be a lot more. I expected there to be some better matchups. Granted, we have some good fights about it, but some head scratchers as well. I feel like they definitely could have loaded this from top to bottom if they wanted to. I just think financially it was very expensive to begin with. So, I mean, they really had to cut some corners in certain ways.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, the UFC sent out this press release to the media last week, talk about all the things they're doing. I thought one of the things that was kind of interesting, this could be the first time a UFC event on ESPN will be broadcasted in 1080p. I thought that was kind of an interesting note. They brought in a director who's a movie director. Dana White has talked about that. His goal for this is he wants to win an Oscar and Emmy for what they're going to put on Saturday night. I really haven't gone through all the talking points that they put in there, but it's something that definitely I'm going to check out more from my Friday show when I do the MMA Report podcast. I'll be live here on YouTube on the MMA Report YouTube channel, 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. Myself and Daniel will give our takes on UFC 306. Also talk about, I don't know if you saw this, Dana White came out with his Mount Rushmore, which I thought was kind of interesting. I get what Dana White was saying, but you know who I thought Dana White, I was really surprised was not on his Mount Rushmore?
Well, who was on it? I don't even...
So his 2024 list, he was talking more the business side. So he had Jones, Ronda, GSP, and
Chuck Liddell, right?
No, I don't think it was Liddell. I texted. Let me see here. So he had Ronda, Jones, Connor, and GSP. Back in 2020, he had Nunez, Jones, Hoyce. And it looks like the other one is maybe Connor. Or no, Liddell. It was Hoyce and Liddell. And I thought it was interesting because I was like, because me and Daniel were going back in text message today on this. And I said, you know what? If we're talking about long-term reigning MMA champions, I think the first three on the list are easy. Jones, GSP, and the guy that Dana has not mentioned, Anderson Silva.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then, now, the fourth one... I think you can go a lot of places.
It's got to be Amanda Nunes.
Okay, if we're talking about women's MMA, it's Amanda Nunes. I would throw Fedor Emelianenko into that. We're talking MMA. Mount Rushmore. I think Fedor's got to be involved in the conversation.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy is despite all those accolades from all those fighters mentioned, nobody moves the needle more than Conor McGregor. And he is a two-time champion. So it's just like Conor McGregor is at the beginning of everybody's list despite not having the longest reign. From a business standpoint, there's nobody in the world that's done it better. He's virtually a billionaire. And, he took the sport to a completely different level. He has accomplished great things. And when he's been active, he's had some phenomenal performances. So, despite all those, reigning titles and how many times they defended the belt, it's crazy that you have to, narrow it down to four people because I really like Demetrius Johnson too. You know what I mean? I love DJ, and it's sad to see some of your favorite fighters start to retire from the sport. But I mean, life goes on, and we all get older. So it definitely was a good choice for Demetrius Johnson to get out ahead before he keeps staying around, hanging around, and really, kind of deteriorating his already amazing legacy.
I never believe that R word. Never will. I will never believe that R word.
Yeah, well, he said mixed martial arts, if you notice. So I think he's going to mess around with jiu-jitsu and grappling. I think grappling's the best pivot from MMA fighters, right? You got Uriah Faber still competing in, grappling super fights. And, he was a WEC two-time champ, UFC hopeful, and one of the best lower weight class guys out there that got the eyeballs on the lower weight class. And then now he's just taking super fights and grappling, and I don't blame him. It's a great way to stay active and still get your competitive juices flowing.
Of course, this is the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, we're here live on YouTube here. Typically, on a Wednesday or Thursday. We do not have memberships here on our YouTube channel. I just want to get some clarification out there because I saw some stuff in our Discord. This show will remain free. It's not going behind a paywall, but we are going to offer benefits to people who are members of our YouTube community. One of those things that we're going to do is these fighter interviews that I'm doing. Our members will get first a priority on those, so you'll be able to watch those 24 to 48 hours before we'll make that video public. So we do appreciate, I know we've already got one member who's popped in already, so I really do appreciate that. Of course, great way to show your support for the channel. Other great way to show your support for the channel, hit that thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel. That really does help us what we're doing here at Fight HQ. But of course, I know you're here to hear us talk about UFC Noche going down here on Saturday night. And first, as we talk about DFS game theory, Pete, as I was putting together my spreadsheet this morning, the first thing I think truly sticks out to you is this is not your typical 12, 13 type fight UFC card. We got 10 fights here, so that's part of the game theory. And then, of course, you look at the salaries of the main event, co-main event, both being 5-round fights. Man, going to be tough to kind of avoid those fights, but I think also the thought process is in these big field GPP tournaments, if you want to get different, maybe only rostering one of these fighters in the main event, co-main event, or maybe you just kind of get crazy and go with 0.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the best way to differentiate yourself. I don't recommend it. I do think that more often than not, these 5-round fighters, they make it into the optimal lineup. And it's not like you're paying a hefty price tag for anybody within the 5-round bouts. I mean, they're all fairly cheap. So they're all affordable, which makes it a very easy click to have both of them a part of your lineups. And I do think that there's great volume attached to both fights. And there's also some finishing upside for both fights as well. So it's not like we're going to have low volume stinkers that'll go 25 minutes. I actually predict 2 finishes. So I'm excited. And then the other thing that really sticks out on the slate to me is the one dominant, well, I shouldn't say one dominant, but the high-priced option of Raul Rosas Jr. priced at $9,700. Him and Merab are the best grapplers on the slate. And they have the highest ceiling on the slate as far as takedown upside and what DraftKings scoring really accommodates for. So I think getting away from Raul Rosas Jr. can be a little troublesome, but it definitely makes you unique. I expect it to be a very popular click, 9,700. You want to target these fighters with wrestling upside, and he not only that, he has fantastic jiu-jitsu. He's rounding out his striking. And he's a finisher. So, like, the one thing I will say is that if he doesn't get a finish, he doesn't put up volume striking because he's so worried about control time, which is fine. But let's say it's a quick takedown and sub. Maybe he doesn't pay off the 9,700, or maybe it's a couple takedowns per round en route to good control time. Still, maybe not necessary at 9,700, but it's a conversation to be had.
Well, I mean, think about it from last week where we were having the conversation about Isaac Dolgari. Yes, he did get that first round finish, but he had so much control time and dominated. I think he still got 120, 125 points. Yeah, he did. Something like that. So, like, he was still a guy. I mean, obviously there were some other things that just didn't come in for us last week, but, that's got to be the thing. Yeah, that $9,700 price tag, I was really looking into a Richie Lang in terms of takedown defense this morning. That was one of the things that I was looking in there, and I thought that was a really interesting question. I will just get to it now because I think it kind of plays into game theories. And Sam asked over on our score channel, of course, there's a score channel totally free. Join link below. He said being 10 fights where the top leverage play will come from the 9K or the 8K or both. Look, I think the leverage play to me, I'm really looking at, I'm not scratching out. Let me just say this. I'm not scratching out the main event, co-main event, but as I'm thinking about leverage play, I'm literally just putting a black box on those 4 fighters and going, okay, where could that leverage play come from the rest of the card? I think that's kind of the thought process you got to go into. And, maybe it is, you look at that high 9,000, those 8,800, 89, 9,000 type fighters, maybe it's a Daniel Zellhuber, because one of the things I'm going to talk about him later is his strikes landed per minute.
Yeah, so it's a great point that there can be a leverage spot on the bottom end salary wise, in the middle, and at the top end. For me, I think the best leverage spot on the entire slate is similar to last week, where Natalia Silva was a high priced option,
Mhm.
and I liked her every round. I liked her even from finish market. Like I thought that she had the potential to really outperform expectations. It didn't happen. She came in with relatively low ownership. She got the decision win, very dominant performance. But at like 15%, I believe what her ownership was, or something like that. It's women's MMA at a high priced option, low finish rates within women's MMA in comparison to other weight classes and other fights on the card. I think people are going to be skipping past Yazmin Jauregui. And I really think that Jauregui there at 9,200, it's an interesting spot because I think she's fought a much better strength of schedule than Souza has. And I think that at 9,200, that's the leverage play that I will be circling and attacking. Daniel Zellhuber, yes, in a striking matchup, he's put up good volume in the past. But if you look at it, right, like he landed 120 significant strikes against Francisco Prado. He still didn't score great, Jason, which is kind of a head scratcher. Only scored 78 fantasy points at 8,900. That just won't do it at 9,000. I do think that Jauregui, however you pronounce it, is going to be in a very, very interesting spot here from possibly sneaky takedown upside. But I think she has some awesome hands that she'll put on display here against Souza. So that's my stand of the week. I like her a lot, and I like her from a leverage standpoint. And I'll tell you what, if they give me Natalia Silva at 15% ownership all the time, I'm probably going to take it. You know what I mean? I'm probably always going to take that chance just because I believe in a skill set. It's tough to predict scores. I believe in skill sets, and I like the skill set of Jauregui here too.
Yeah, I think another fighter that sticks out to me and kind of in that similar type of range. And, of course, you kind of question about how is he going to bounce back. Joshua Van at 8,900, taking this fight here on short notice. But, of course, coming off that loss back in July to Charles Johnson, how does he bounce back? I think that's another guy to pay attention to there. But let's get right into breaking down these fight scores. The main event is the bantamweight title matchup, a matchup that I didn't know if we would ever see these two fighters step into the cage against each other. Sean O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili. Of course, Sugar Sean making his second title defense here. He's a minus 135 betting favorite. Merab come in here at plus 115 over on DraftKings. O'Malley 8,500, Merab 7,700, and then over on FanDuel you got O'Malley at $20 and Merab at $16. And when you kind of look at start breaking down this fight here, Sean O'Malley does have a reach advantage of 4 inches in this matchup. When you look at the strikes land per minute, Sean O'Malley 7.63, Merab on the other side at 4.50. Of course, Merab, we know about that tenacious takedown abilities that he has. He averages 6.4 takedowns per 15 minutes of fighting here. And one of the things about Merab, while he did start 0-2 in the UFC, he's won 10 in a row. 9 of those have come by decision, and this is the first time Merab fights 2 times in a calendar year since 2021. And, Pete, I mean, it's not a hard fight to break down. I think me and you both understand that. I mean, we've got a striker, we got a grappler. One of the things that I think as I've thought about this fight leading up to this one is, sometimes Merab probably shouldn't share as much as he does on social media. So you got to imagine part of the Sugar Sean game plan here is going after that eye, maybe potentially trying to open that cut here. But also, I think about Merab and just the fact is he's just going to keep coming and coming and coming. I mean, we've seen, go back to the Peter Yan fight, the amount of takedown attempts he had in that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a unique pace. Merab Dvalishvili is just an absolute workhorse, and he's a machine. He really is. And, he lives up to his nickname. He had 11 takedowns against Peter Yan, 7.5, almost 8 minutes of control time in a 25-minute bout. 5 takedowns against the Olympic wrestling Henry Cejudo. 5 takedowns in 4.5 minutes of control time. I feel like Henry Cejudo really just thought his credentials were going to be enough to just avoid takedowns, or was able to get up so easy. It was just such a weird and bizarre scene to see Henry get taken down. But Henry is a flyweight, right? And at bantamweight, he's had success, but you got a guy in Merab Dvalishvili, who's been active in there against tough competition. It's a name, and Merab passed that test. If he gets his hands on Sean O'Malley and closes that gap and starts to make this into a wrestling match, it doesn't look good. It doesn't favor Sean O'Malley. It's just on the outside. I think that Sean O'Malley's range is so amazing, and he's very deceptive with his length. He's very deceptive with his rhythm, with his timing. Merab's striking is too clunky for me. He's too jittery. He's too clunky. He moves his head a lot, but he's predictable. He's really predictable, in my opinion, from the striking standpoint. I think there's tons of ways to set him up for a knee up the middle. There's tons of ways to set him up for a head kick. There's tons of ways to make him overreact to parries and feints and fakes so that he bites on something and Sean O'Malley capitalizes. I'm a believer in Sean O'Malley's striking. I'm also a very big believer in his IQ. His fight IQ is fantastic, and it's because he's a prodigy under Tim Welch, who I think is a fantastic mind within the sport. Really looks at things underneath a microscope, really dissects opponents to a high degree, and I really appreciate that because I do the same thing for my guys if I can. In amateurs, you kind of, the fight film is limited, but when I've been given the task to study people, as I have for my friend Nate Andrews and others, I've really focused on tendencies, focused on setups, traps, combinations that'll work, combinations that will kind of not, what we won't practice as much. And I also think people just are completely sleeping on Sean O'Malley's jiu-jitsu. I'm not asking for him to go out there and grapple with Merab, but I do think that he is, schooled enough to threaten with a guillotine to possibly stifle some takedowns. We've already seen Merab against Ricky Simon get caught in a choke and choked unconscious at the buzzer, and that was kind of a big asterisk on his record, and was just a weird situation to begin with. In addition to that, I just think we've seen guillotines, if used properly, as long as you're not pulling a guillotine, you can defend a takedown pretty well. I mean, look what Dan Hooker did against Mateus Gamrot. That guillotine threat really just made the amazing takedowns and wrestling of Mateus Gamrot. He kind of hit a wall and he had to address the choke or else he was going to get put to sleep. And then it led to getting back to the feet, which led to more, scrambles and everything where Dan Hooker was wise to it. I like Sean O'Malley right now. I really do. I understand that Merab could break the slate, and, I'd probably put the same exact lineup that I do feel comfortable with, one with O'Malley and one with Merab. But I really do think that Sean O'Malley knocks Merab Dvalishvili out cold. And I think it's going to be an out cold knockout, not one where it's ground and pound where, he drops Aljamain Sterling and has some follow-up shots and the referee intervenes. I think this is going to be an out cold bad knockout to add to Sean O'Malley's highlight reel. So I could be dead wrong on it. You're talking about two of the best fighters in the world. We need somebody to not have an off night, and we need that, all these fighters to bring their best selves into that cage to have a true prediction for it. But we know it's the fight game. Yeah, that's not how it is. So I'm going to back Sean O'Malley from everything that I've seen and just my gut feeling. I like him here at 8,500. I like them both from a DFS standpoint. I think this fight's a must-have. I do not see how this fight doesn't smash. So give me O'Malley at 8,500, but Dvalishvili as an underdog's a pretty damn good one as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about that grappling upside you had, just go back to a week ago with Sean Brady. If you didn't have Sean Brady in your lineup, you were not going to be optimal, scoring 164 points over on DraftKings. By the way, that TKO KO prop for Sean O'Malley is plus 150. If I was going to bet Merab in this matchup, I think you could easily just play it safe and just take the money line at plus 115. But if you're looking for a little more juice, I think maybe seeing if that decision prop goes up a little bit more than what it's at currently sitting at plus 175. I think Merab wins. It's a Merab wins by decision. But I am with you. I do think Sean O'Malley is going to get it done. I think that reach advantage, and I think that we're starting to get to the point where Tim Welch is finally starting to get the credit of being a high-level coach in this sport. I think for a long time it's really been about Sean, but I think you've seen the things, and even Sean has talked about it, the fact of, way Tim breaks down fight footage and sees tendencies and sees, he talked about in the Aljo fight. They saw things in film with Aljo, and of course we both know Aljo, Merab, training partners, and I don't know if you saw the clip from the Usman and Cejudo podcast. They had Sean O'Malley on, and Sean O'Malley giving Henry Cejudo crap of why'd you let Aljo take you down?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, why'd you let Merab take you down, right? Or Aljo or whoever the hell it was. Yeah, I think that Henry's shooting his shot, doing everything he can to get another payday. And somehow if O'Malley knocks out Merab and Henry opens his mouth loud enough, I think that they, even off of losses, they may just try to build the career of Sean O'Malley and give him Henry Cejudo. And I think that's why Cejudo's throwing some shade at Sugar Sean and trying to say he's hearing from people that Sean O'Malley's having a hard time getting up from bottom in camp, and he has spies and he has this and that, and he's saying that Sean O'Malley's been struggling getting back to his feet. And I think it's all trying to make Merab look better because Henry Cejudo lost to Merab Dvalishvili. So, I mean, obviously he wants Merab to go out there and win, or he wants so that he looks good, because he lost to him, or he wants Sean O'Malley to want to fight with Henry Cejudo. So it's a win-win for Henry Cejudo, and I think the most annoying fighter in the world is just not going to go away. I want him to go away, but he ain't.
Well, I mean, I think that if you look at what's next in this division, I think Umar Nurmagomedov should be next, but I would say I think it's probably more likely that if we get a Sean win on Saturday, he waits to see what happens between Max Holloway and Ilya Taporia, potentially goes up to 145, and I think as a fight fan stylistically, I think that I would not be shocked if the days at Sean O'Malley at 135 are closer to an end than we think, that he goes up to 145. And also one of the things I think people have to understand is if while Sean O'Malley he has his own gym, but he does utilize all those bantamweights that are at the MMA lab, and just start looking at the 135ers at the MMA lab. He's got some very talented. There's a couple guys that are in that top 15, Mario Batista, Kyler Phillips, and some others that are at that gym as well. So that's something kind of noticed there. But yeah, I would
love to see those rounds. I would love to see those rounds between O'Malley and Batista, and O'Malley and Kyler Phillips. I think they've just, helped elevate each other's games to such a level where they're all so goddamn good. And I'm a big Kyler Phillips guy. I'm a big Mario Batista guy. I'm a big Sean O'Malley, and you need all these other fighters pushing yourself, and I think that's why you're seeing strong performances from these guys. So, good for them. When the day comes where Kyler Phillips has to fight Sean O'Malley, if that fight happens, so be it. I think there's some other fighters kind of nipping at his heels as well. Peyton Talbot's very exciting, so we'll have to see with that. So we'll see between 135 pounds and 145 pounds. O'Malley has so many options.
Of course, our co-main event will be the trilogy matchup between Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko. Grasso making the title defense here in the flyweight division. Of course, this is the third meeting between these two fighters. Alexa Grasso enters this one as a minus 135 betting favorite, plus 115 for Shevchenko. Grasso 8,300 on DK, Shevchenko 7,900. Then over on FanDuel, you got $19 for Grasso, $17 for Shevchenko. Of course, the first two meetings between these ladies both took place last year. First meeting, Alexa Grasso shocks the MMA world by submitting Valentina Shevchenko in the fourth round. And then in the rematch, it was a split draw. Of course, both of these ladies have been the coaches on The Ultimate Fighter, which really led to the delay in terms of this matchup happening. When you look at Alexa Grasso, 9 of her 12 UFC fights in the UFC have gone the distance. The other 3 have ended in submission, 2 wins and 1 loss. One of the things I did find interesting kind of going down the resume of Valentina Shevchenko, she has very much a trend, Pete. I don't know if you noticed this one when you were breaking this down, that if you look at her UFC run, when the previous fight ends in a decision, The next fight is a finish. That happens more times than not. That was a trend that I was kind of looking at that I thought was kind of a very interesting trend. And of course, Saturday will mark 11 straight title fights for Valentina Shevchenko. The last time she was not in a title fight in the UFC, you got to go back to 2018 against Priscilla Cachoeira. And maybe this stat will surprise some people. I don't think this is going to surprise my guy Pete here. Shevchenko averages 2.56 takedowns per 15 minutes of fighting, and Grasso has a better strikes landed per minute as she lands 4.67, and for Shevchenko is 3.28, Pete.
Yeah, who would have thought? Who would have thought that the, multi-time Muay Thai and kickboxing champ in Valentina Shevchenko wouldn't have the best striking numbers in comparison to Alexa Grasso, who really enjoys looking for the submission. It's just Alexa Grasso's boxing has really elevated throughout these years. She's always been a fun fighter that I've loved watching. I mean, in women's MMA, I love the high volume fights. I love it when people can impose their will. I always saw talent, and now she's really capitalized. I mean, the gym is a hot gym as well. They just prepare you guys so well over there in Mexico. Alexa Grasso at 8,300 versus Shevchenko at 7,900. I think that it's a must-have as well. So I will not be avoiding either one of the 5-round bouts. I think this fight's stackable. I really do think it's stackable, and not something I recommend all too often. But the salaries make it so damn easy to make it happen. 8,300 for Grasso, 7,900 for Shevchenko. In their first encounter, Shevchenko scored 81. She was priced at 9,400 because she was a massive favorite. Grasso was priced at 6,800. She scored 91. So they both, oddly enough, scored 91 and 81. You then had Valentina Shevchenko in the rematch, priced at 8,500. She scored 91 in a draw. And then we had Alexa Grasso score 94 in a draw. So I think it's just a well-matched fight. You have the kickboxing, the selective output of Shevchenko, which has definitely diminished over time. She's become a little too patient and a little too hesitant for my liking. I like it when she was violent and she was the hunter. She's become the hunted. And I do think that Alexa Grasso's volume, it's just a lot to deal with. Her boxing, her hands are way better than Valentina Shevchenko. Shevchenko seems to be the stronger of the wrestlers, but I think that Grasso's jiu-jitsu is really, really slick. So, like I said, it's a very, very tough fight. There were scrambles throughout, reversals throughout, tons of significant strikes and total strikes. The way I see it is a passing of the torch moment. Sometimes a fighter can dominate a division, and then they run into a fighter that really gives them problems. I think that Shevchenko's kryptonite honestly might just be Alexa Grasso, because I don't think that there's much besides age going against Valentina Shevchenko. The skills are still there. It's not like I'm seeing the skills diminish. The decision-making, possibly. The training's always been a weird wrinkle, a part of her game. There's no consistency other than her head coach and her sister. They always bounce and do different things every camp. I don't know. She's just under the watchful eye of one really strong coach. I feel like if she ever went to a super team, man, that would be unbelievable. Imagine if Shevchenko went to American Top Team. I think that that's where Amanda Nunes had such an advantage over a lot of people. Not only was she fantastic, but she was a part of the best team in the world who prepped her and had her ready. Her teammates had her ready. I just don't see that for Shevchenko. And I definitely see Alexa Grasso's team. I think the team is Lobo Fight Gym, if I'm not looking at it right at this moment. But I know that Mexican team is a very high-level team with jiu-jitsu, coached by Diego Lopes, who's on this card as well. The boxing, Mexican boxing, is always a staple. And we've seen Alexa Grasso's striking elevate. So that's a long-winded way of me saying I like Alexa Grasso in the fight. I just think that this is a passing of the torch moment. If it does go 5 rounds, Shevchenko is not, completely done in my opinion. I just think that Grasso is going to have the edge from round to round or over 25 minutes. I will stack it in some. I am going to play Alexa Grasso at 8,300. I know that we want to have, a fighter reclaim their title. I just don't see it here, Jason. I don't know if you're different than me, but I like Alexa Grasso.
Yeah, I like Alexa Grasso in this situation too. I mean, one of the things that does certainly concern me in this situation is if you look historically in the UFC, fighters 35 years and older typically do not have the best records in terms of UFC title fights. Valentina Shevchenko enters this one at 36 years old. And, sometimes there's just athletes that, there's another athlete that has their kryptonite. And I think you're right on here. I think Alexa Grasso goes out and gets the win. And you look at the price point, man, it's really tough to avoid this one here. If you want to look at some of the prop bets over here, the decision prop, Grasso plus 200, Shevchenko plus 180. If you look at Shevchenko in terms of the other props, TKO KO plus 900, plus 1100 for submission. On the other side, Grasso, that submission prop plus 350. And the TKO KO prop is at plus 700. But yeah, I do like Alexa Grasso to go out there and get the win here. If you told me I had to roster either a main event or co-main event, I would definitely lead the main event more than the co-main event.
Yeah, I mean, it's women's MMA, but it is. So we've seen Grasso lose rounds before and then come back out of nowhere and beat Shevchenko. She scored 91. Is 91 necessary at 83? 8,300? I still think so. I mean, if it goes 25 minutes and she gets the nod, gets the decision, we're thinking about what, 119 for points in that most recent fight. So, I'm sorry, 124. I think that Alexa Grasso or Shevchenko are sneaky, and it's the 5 rounds. But I don't know how I could actually get away from one of them. I just have OCD, so like I can't get away from a 25-minute fight. And I have a hard time not spending all my salary either.
I get you out of that one. Let's go over to our next matchup. Of course, this is a matchup that was supposed to take place back at UFC at 303, but Brian Ortega pulls out on fight day. And, of course, we all know the stories where Dan Ige ends up stepping up. Diego Lopes takes that matchup here. Diego Lopes enters this one as a minus 175 betting favorite. Brian Ortega plus 145. Ortega 7,500 on DK, $15 on FanDuel. Or Lopez is 8,700 on DK and $19 on FanDuel. I was a little surprised that this matchup got booked because Brian Ortega, the word has been out there that he is looking to go up to 155 pounds. So I think that is something to kind of pay attention to as we lead into this one. Diego Lopes does have a 3-inch reach advantage in this matchup. When you look at the strikes land per minute, Brian Ortega 4.07, Diego Lopes 3.24, takedowns per 15 minutes of fighting, Ortega 1.17. Of course, we all know there's a reason he is called T-City. We all know his love for the triangle choke there. Diego Lopes a 0.33 takedowns per 15 minutes of fighting. Kind of an interesting note here on Brian Ortega. This will be the second time he'll fight. This will be his second time fighting in this calendar year. It's the first time he's fought 2 times in a calendar year since 2018. That was a long time ago. We talk about that. Wow. And I think one of my storylines with this fight is when you look at a massive difference in level of competition that Brian Ortega has competed against versus what Diego Lopes competed against. Of course, Brian Ortega has been in the UFC for a long time. He's been facing the elite of this 145-pound division, where Diego Lopes has been on the rise, and I think you would say his most notable win at 145 pounds is against Sadiq Youssef.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a perfect matchup to test Diego Lopes, and it's a perfect matchup to see if Brian Ortega is still a part of that elite category. The issue is that like once you enter the high rankings, you need to stay sharp, because if your skills deteriorate, you're still going to have a big name, and every up and comer is going to be nipping at your heels, wanting a shot at you, and that's basically what's happening right here. It's a win-win for the UFC, depending on, both guys. I think having Diego Lopes, the exciting young prospect, win will be fantastic. Also having Brian Ortega, get back into form and reclaim, contention within the division is also important. So it's a perfect matchup, and it's perfect timing. I'm interested here because I do think that Diego Lopes was humanized against Dan Ige. Dan Ige does that to a lot of people. Dan Ige is a very tough opponent. Dan Ige took the shots that nobody else has been able to from Diego Lopes. Diego Lopes threw up some submissions, had a beautiful Darce choke, or an anaconda. I forget which one it was. But that head and arm sequence had Dan Ige in some trouble, but he stayed calm. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt was on display of just using his defense to survive, defend, and then reverse or get into a better situation. 4 minutes of control time for Diego Lopes, scored 70 fantasy points. So that was a letdown from a salary standpoint. But, I mean, there were so many moving parts within that matchup of having 3 or 4 different opponents stepping up and falling out. Ultimately just deciding, get me an opponent I want to fight. So credit to Diego Lopes. He's an absolute stud for that. Dan Ige is a stud for stepping up on 24 hours notice or whatever the hell it was. I'm interested to see the jiu-jitsu exchanges between the two. I'm also interested to see the boxing exchanges. I think the more powerful strikes clearly come from Diego Lopes. We've seen Brian Ortega take damage at times, get hurt at times. He also has hands himself. I don't think his hands are as good as what many people say they are. I think that his wrestling is probably better than Diego Lopes, but the jiu-jitsu is the one head scratcher because I just don't know. I don't know who's better in 2024. Yeah, I know that the triangle choke of Brian Ortega is his patented move. As far as Diego Lopes, I mean, he's just so damn dangerous in all areas of the jiu-jitsu realm as well. So I feel like those jiu-jitsu attempts will nullify each other, and it will be the striking of Diego Lopes against the wrestling of Brian Ortega. What wins out? I think the damage of Diego Lopes is going to give him the nod here. I can also see this being a situation where Diego Lopes possibly hurts rocks and nearly finishes Brian Ortega. Maybe gets a very dominant round 1, like a 10-8. And then we see him humanized again in round 2 and round 3, similar to what Dan Ige was able to do. But if Brian Ortega could get on top of him and avoid some sticky situations, maybe this is a very close decision and comes down to, those 3 judges. You never know, especially if a 10-8 is involved. My prediction is that the damage is going to outweigh the control time. So I'm going to be picking Diego Lopes here, but I really wouldn't be shocked to see Brian Ortega do it. I think this will be a very popular fight. 8,700 against 7,500. You look and you see what Diego Lopes has done in his debut, nearly finishing Movsar Evloev, scoring 23 fantasy points. The box score doesn't do it justice, but man, he was on short notice, putting on a hell of a fight. 90 points against Gavin Tucker, 105 against Sabatini, 122 against Sadiq Youssef, and then 70 against Dan Ige. Brian Ortega, if you look, though, his last wins outside of Yair Rodriguez, where he nearly got finished in round 1, the Korean Zombie, and Frankie Edgar. Those are his last 3 wins. So I understand he's fought Yair twice. He's fought and lost to Volkanovski. He's also fought and lost to Max Holloway. I'm saying his last 3 wins aren't of the best from a, of the now type of fighters. Korean Zombie isn't what he used to be. Frankie Edgar isn't what he used to be. Yair is very dangerous but one-dimensional. So I'm interested to see if the strength of schedule really matters here in 2024. I'll be picking Diego Lopes at 8,700.
Look, we all remember the Holloway-Ortega matchup where literally in the middle of the fight, Holloway is showing Ortega how to block a punch. I mean, one of the weirdest moments in MMA history here. But, look, Brian has had some injury issues. I think the weigh-ins are very interesting to kind of see here in terms of him. I do wonder, though, if Lopes gets the victory, doesn't get the finish, can he be optimal at 8,700 when we talk about some of the other price tags there? Looking at the prop markets here, TKO, KO, Ortega plus 600, plus 275 for Lopes. Submission prop plus 700 for Ortega. That may not be you want to throw, a little sprinkle on that one. Lopes plus 500 win via submission. Then we look at decision props plus 350 for Ortega, plus 225 for Diego Lopes. Overall, I think this is classic UFC matchmaking. I think there's a reason ultimately the UFC went with this matchup. I think they're viewing this as we've got a chance that they truly do believe. I've heard some things. They believe Diego Lopes can be a star for them, and I think this matchup was made for a reason. They think he's going to go out there and have a star-making performance. So overall, I do like Diego Lopes, but in terms of GPP underdogs, I don't mind definitely going to Brian Ortega. Next up, we got Zellhuber taking on Esteban. Zellhuber is the betting favorite here, minus 235, plus 190 for Esteban, who is 7,200 on DK, $10 on FanDuel, where Zellhuber, 9,000 on DK. $21 on FanDuel. And Pete, the first thing that sticks out to you when you look at the tail of the tape here is going to be that reach advantage, as Zellhuber does have 8-inch reach advantage in this one. Both these guys throw a ton of strikes here. Strikes land per minute, Zellhuber 5.86, Esteban 6.20. Strikes absorbed per minute was one of the things that I wrote down here. So Zellhuber lands 5.86 strikes per minute. His strikes observed per minute, 5.06. I think that was a stat that definitely stuck out to me, by the way, for Esteban, is 3.49. Zellhuber has won 3 in a row since dropping his UFC debut there against Trey Ogden. 2 of his 3 wins have in the UFC have come by decision. He is coming off a fight night bonus in his previous 2 matchup. On the other side, Esteban has won back-to-back fights after he dropped his UFC debut, coming off a 37-second win there against Terrence McKinney. And one of the things that does stick out to you about Esteban, this guy doesn't waste any time. 7 of his 13 wins have come in the first round, Pete.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting fight because you have a sniper on the outside and Daniel Zellhuber, who really likes to pump his jab and keep you at the end of his punches, versus, a gunner in Esteban Ribovics. I'm interested to see if Ribovics can get inside of that range, because if he does, his hook combinations and his combinations in general are just very, very powerful. And when he touches people, he hurts them. He hurts them often. I'm a fan of Ribovics because I think that the killer instinct is so unique. We saw him get taken down multiple times against Razabov in his debut. Still scored 49 fantasy points, landed a knockdown, beat Kenwella Kirk up en route to a 92 fantasy point performance, and then knocked out Terrence McKinney in a beautiful, beautiful combination and in beautiful fashion, scoring 127 fantasy points. I'm not like sold that Daniel Zellhuber is going to live up to the nickname of the Golden Boy. When I watch him, it's just, I'm not sure. Maybe in the gym he's different, but everything that I've seen, it's okay. Like it's mid, it's mediocre, it's all right. Losing a decision to Trey Ogden, I think Trey Ogden's a hell of a fighter. Beating Lando Venata. A lot of people have been able to do that, especially they've been able to just outwork Lando Venata. Venata in the UFC was 4-7, I believe. Christos Giagos, he was able to pick up a finish over him and score 85 fantasy points. Giagos was 6-8 in the UFC because of his 2 stints in the UFC. Landing 120 significant strikes over Prado and scoring 78 fantasy points. Prado's 1-2 in the UFC, so it's just like, I think the line's a little wide. That's my thing. And I think the value is clearly on Ribovics. Styles make fights. Zellhuber can make this look easy by staying on the outside. Has an excellent coach in Eric Nixick and Extreme Couture prepping him. There's a lot of guys, though. So it's a great thing to have, multiple training partners and being a part of a mega camp. But you also might miss out on some of these private sessions with these high-level coaches and getting put the extra work, the coaches putting in, tons of fight film study for every single guy. And it's just like you could get lost in the shuffle because there's 50 fighters on the mat at a time. You know what I mean? And there's so many fights prepping. Granted, I'm not saying they don't prepare their fighters because they're an excellent camp. I'm just saying that, I can see a guy as dangerous as Ribovics getting inside of that range. And then if he gets inside, what? Zellhuber's going to clinch with him. Could look to take him down, yes. But I think the damage is going to lie with Ribovics here. I think that at 7,200, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting like 7,600, 7,700. Seeing Zellhuber priced at such a massive favorite, I think it's just some recency bias because of the performance against Prado. Prado, relatively unproven. You know what I mean? He has one UFC win, relatively unproven. Yes, maybe he has all the skills in the world. Very dangerous on the regional scene, but like this is a little too wide for my liking. And we've seen Ribovics actually pick up two, victories inside the octagon. So give me the value on Ribovics here. Whether he loses or not, I think that the line's just too wide for my liking.
No, I totally get that on the wide being too wide, and I get that. I mean, to me, it's about that reach advantage really sticks out to me. If he can sit on the outside, and pick him apart. That's why I'm leaning Zellhuber, but I think from a DFS perspective, I do kind of understand where you're coming from there. In terms of that, if you look at the prop bets, Zellhuber, TKO KO plus 300, plus 800 by submission, plus 125 via decision for Esteban, plus 550 TKO KO, submission prop plus 1,800, and to win by decision is plus 400 there. Of course, we do have memberships here to our Fight HQ channel right here on YouTube, and Brian Bircham became the first member of the Fight HQ community here, so appreciate you taking advantage of that. Of course, you can we'll have exclusive videos that are going to come out, early access to videos, but as I said earlier on the show is not going behind a paywall. Just want to let everyone know that the show is not going behind a paywall, but me and Pete are going to be coming up with some exclusive content for people who are members of our YouTube channel, that some things that we're working on that will be announced here in the next couple of weeks. Next up, we got Ronaldo Rodriguez taking on Ode Osbourne. Ode Osbourne a plus 115 betting underdog, minus 135 for Rodriguez. A600 on DK, $17 on FanDuel. Osbourne 7,600 on DK and $12 on FanDuel. When you look at this one, just like the last matchup, we got to fire with a noble reach advantage, and that is Ode Osbourne here, a 8-inch reach advantage. Of course, Rodriguez, we first saw him on Dana White's Contender Series back in 2020. He did lose that matchup, but after that, he ended up winning 5 in a row before making his UFC debut back in February, where he got a submission win there against Bondar. Of course, Osbourne on the other side, he's dropped back-to-back fights, both via submission. It's 1-3 in his last 4 matchup. Ode Osbourne, this will be his 10th UFC fight. 7 of his 9 UFC fights have ended in a finish, and I like Ode Osbourne. Had some great conversations with Ode. Of course, initially coming from Wisconsin, then ended up moving to Vegas for his training. But what always kind of concerned me is there's fighters that you sit there and say, man, I can definitely see the boom in them. I can see the bust in them. And to me, as I look at Ode Osbourne, he's one of those guys of like, can you trust him even in an underdog role?
You know what? I am going to trust him. And I am going to trust him here because what has Rodriguez done besides beating Bondar, who was winless inside the UFC? I understand Bondar outside the UFC was supposed to be a very talented fighter, but when he came to the UFC, it just never materialized. I mean, Bondar went 0-3 in the UFC. I'm not even sure if he's still with the promotion. Ode Osbourne has some victories inside the UFC. So to me, like that, like it, and against guys that have been in the UFC for a while. Yes, he's been finished. He has a knockout over Jerome Rivera, not UFC level. A victory over CJ Vergara. Okay, I like that. I think that Vergara is a tough guy. Knockout over Adeshev. Okay. A decision win over Charles Johnson. I like that. I understand the volatility surrounding Ode Osbourne, as my daughter's going crazy. I understand the volatility. I mean, like, yes, he's been subbed in his debut against Brian Kelleher, knocked out against Manel Kopp, knocked out against Tyson Nam, subbed against Almabayev, subbed against Filio in round 1. The Jamaican sensation's volatile. But I don't think it's going to matter in this matchup. I think that he's going to, with his striking, with everything, I think that he's going to give Rodriguez some problems. I really do. I'm interested, and I like him here as an underdog. Ronaldo Rodriguez, to me, isn't anything special. And for there to be an 8-inch reach advantage for Ode Osbourne, a flyweight, is massive. That's massive. I think that Ode Osbourne can pick him apart from range. He has good striking. He can also get some takedowns if he needs to because he has some sneaky wrestling to him. It's his jiu-jitsu that he's lacking. I understand that Rodriguez can get the back and hit a rear naked choke, which has been somewhat of the kryptonite to Ode Osbourne. But I'm not betting on Rodriguez, who's nicknamed Lazy Boy, and I'm not betting on Rodriguez, who lost to Jerome Rivera. That is such an ugly loss, my man. And I understand that fighters evolve, but he lost to Jerome Rivera, Jason. I can't get behind that. And I understand that that was on the Contender Series. What he did is he landed 2 takedowns, had 2 submissions, relatively just got outstruck and outmaneuvered. I think the same thing's going to happen here against Ode Osbourne. I like Ode Osbourne as an underdog at 7,600. I don't understand the line. I think it's just a fade on Ode because he's so prone to getting finished. But within these awful losses are some sneaky wins. Charles Johnson just knocked out Joshua Van. CJ Vergara has some pretty notable wins within the UFC as well. Does he perform the best in the decision victory? Probably not. 69 fantasy points over Vergara, 70 fantasy points over Johnson. But with such a massive reach advantage, maybe he hurts Rodriguez and finishes him. Maybe he picks him apart with tons of volume because he just stays on the outside. Long-winded way of me saying I like Ode Osbourne at 7,600. I understand you can't trust him. How can anybody trust Rodriguez when he's beaten only Dennis Bondar, who's 0-3 in the UFC?
Yeah, it's just one of those things. If I look at Ode Osbourne, and to me, he's kind of like he's the flyweight version of Terrence McKinney. It's a boom bust play with him. You know, that's kind of the way I look at it in terms of that one. Of course, appreciate everyone tuning in. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button right here on YouTube. That does help us out a ton. Of course, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to do that. We'll have a DraftKings contest later on this week, so be on the lookout for that. We'll put that link in our Discord channel. Of course, if you are watching us after the fact, you got any questions, be sure to leave a comment below. Myself or people will definitely get back to you on there. And of course, if you listen to us on the podcasting platforms, be sure to hit that 5-star rating and review. That really does help us out a ton as well. Next up, we got Irene Aldana taking on Norma Dumont here. Irene Aldana, and this is a straight up pick 'em fight between these two ladies here. Aldana, 8,400 DK, $14 on FanDuel. Dumont, 7,800 DK, $13 on FanDuel. When you look at the strikes land per minute, Pete, Irene Aldana, 5.24, Dumont, 3.11. Since 2018, Aldana is 8-3 in the UFC. The 3 losses have come against fighters who have held a UFC title: Raquel Pennington, Holly Holm, and Amanda Nunes. All those losses did come via decision. This is her first matchup since December, which was a decision win against Carol Hossa. When you look at Norma Dumont on the other side, she is 7-2 in the UFC. She returned to the bantamweight division earlier this year with that decision win against Germaine de Romandame. And of course, one of the things, and we tend to talk about this a lot when we're talking about female mixed martial arts action, the fact of going the distance, going over 2.5 rounds. Dumont's last 8 fights have gone the distance, Pete.
Yeah, I like this fight, and I'm a big Norma Dumont fan. I am. I like Norma Dumont. I think that she's a beautiful, beautiful woman, but she's a fantastic fighter. Irene Aldana is a fighter that I actually had as like title aspirations for because I was a believer of her hands. I was a believer of her picking up some big notable wins. Her Achilles heel has been her wrestling defense, and I understand it's gotten better, but when it's on the feet, she's able to put up tremendous volume. When a fighter incorporates wrestling and mixes in some wrestling, that volume is just not at the same level, obviously, because she's wasting time being taken down and controlled. But not only that, is it zaps that gas tank and zaps that energy a little bit. Norma Dumont's just not going to stand and trade with Irene Aldana. She's very physical. And what she's going to do is she's going to throw big, powerful punches. Not as crisp in the hands department as Irene Aldana from the true boxing pedigree. But Norma Dumont has very, very good hands, very good striking and good Muay Thai, but sneaky takedowns, and she's very strong. It's like deceptive how strong she is. When she gets a hold of people, she's able to get in good top position. She's able to get good control time. I mean, the control time for the past 4 fights is nuts. 7 minutes and 41 seconds over Daniel Wolf, 5 minutes and 54 seconds over Hossa, 9 minutes and 58 seconds over Chandler, 10 minutes and 4 seconds over De Randamie. And whether it's against the cage or a successful takedown, I think that Norma Dumont's able to control where the fight's where the fight is taking place. I think that Irene Aldana at space will have the advantage, clearly. She'll go out there, and if you are just willing to stand in a phone booth or stand at range in the center of the octagon, she'll put up 145 significant strikes landed, as she did against Carol Hosa, scoring 88 fantasy points. She was taken down, and on paper, that KO TKO over Macy Chasson looks excellent, right? Scored 74 fantasy points. That's like one of the flukiest wins I've ever seen. That's an axe kick off your back, so it's a heel kick to the liver of Macy Chasson. Soft body. Okay, that's a pathetic win. It shouldn't happen. You have the beautiful knockout over Santos, yes, at 170 fantasy points. Ketlen Vieira, 110 fantasy points. So she's had some big notable wins, but that win over Macy Chasson is very fluky. It's like Jacob Malkoun against Petrosky, where Petrosky knocked himself out by running into his hip. Granted, last week was one of my worst weeks in history, and I had some bad calls. I understand it, but I think that this fight's really close, and the takedowns could literally just be the difference maker, where they both have moments. Dumont throws hard. She'll probably get lit up a little bit more than Aldana, but Dumont's very strong, and she'll get in top position. I have Dumont winning by split decision. I think that this is going to be a very close fight, where you're going to have a judge favoring damage. You're going to have some other judges kind of be like, the damage was good, but she had way more control time. And I think the decision's going to tilt in Dumont's favor. So I don't predict split decisions often. It is women's MMA, but I'm feeling a Dumont split decision here at 7,800. So if I'm going to play anybody, I don't think that Aldana knocks her out. She could. I just don't see it here. I'm not in love with the 8,400. It's okay. If she doesn't get a finish, I don't think she pays off the price tag. I think that Dumont at 7,800 can easily pay that price tag off. She scored 90 against Irene to beat 90 against Chandler, but she's also scored 63. So this matchup may just be a pass for DFS, but if I must get to one, I think I'd take Norma Dumont at 7,800.
Yeah, I was just going to pull up the split decision price if there's actually anything out there. Yeah, there's not. When it comes to this fight, there's not much props out there in terms of this one. Typically, you get these props kind of later on in the week here, but it's one of those matchups I think likely does go to decision. So I'm kind of with you there. Next up, we got Manuel Torres taking on Ignacio Bahamondes. Bahamondes is the betting underdog here. He is even money, minus 120 for Torres. Torres, A200 DK, $14 on FanDuel. Bahamondes, 8,000 on DK, $12 on FanDuel. And both these guys land high strikes per minute. Torres, 8.14. Bahamondes, 7.15. Takedowns average per 15 minutes fighting. Torres, 3.46. Torres, 3-0 in the UFC. All those wins have come in the first round. That's why that takedown per 15 minutes fighting is high for him. Bahamondes, 4-2 in the UFC. Both of his losses have come via decision. He is coming off a first-round victory there against Christos Giagos, Pete.
This fight's tough. This fight's tough to call. I mean, I think it's lined appropriately. Same with that Aldana and Norma Dumont fight. I think it's a close fight. I think clearly the more dangerous fighter here is Manuel Torres. Torres is just a one-round killer. We haven't seen him go outside of round one in the UFC. So I think it's kind of like uncharted waters, which makes me interested in the underdog, because I do think that Ignacio Bahamondes is good enough to get outside of round one. Ignacio Bahamondes is a guy that I'm really high on. I really am. I'm high on him because I have bias. He's a part of my friend's camp. I think that Mike Valley is a fantastic coach. You've seen what he's done with his incorporation to Bilal Muhammad's game. I think that Valley Flow Striking is a team on the rise in Chicago. And for me, at 8,200, Manuel Torres is going to be one of the most popular, if not the most popular, clicks on the slate. 114 against Camacho, 105 against Mota, 103 against Duncan. I mean, people are probably going to expect the same, that he's going to go out there and get a finish. Here's my issue, though, is I don't think that it's against the best strength of schedule, and arguably both of them haven't fought the best guys. But I know at least Bahamondes has fought more fighters that have been, under the UFC tenure, and you have Torres beating and knocking out in fantastic fashion Frank Camacho, scoring 114. Camacho was 2-6 in the UFC, picking up a beautiful knockout over Mota. Moto's 2-2 in the UFC and viewed as one of the biggest busts inside the promotion because he was supposed to be, a crazy KO guy. And then picking up a victory over Chris Duncan, who's 2-1 in the UFC. So to me, it's mediocre opposition. On the flip side, you have Bahamondes at 8,000, underdog price tag. The guy that's been outside of round one in the UFC against some of the best fighters in the world. He's dropped some fights where he should have won. Like he was a pretty big favorite over John McDessie in his debut. I'm not going to fault him for losing a kickboxing matchup to McDessie, who's pretty sneaky and pretty slick despite the size advantage for Bahamondes. You have Bahamondes in his past 3 wins. Christos Giagos is 6-8 in UFC. Trey Ogden, I think, is pretty damn good and is going to be a guy with a lot of wins and small losses inside the UFC. 3-2. And then you have the questionable Rong Zhu at 1-3. So comparable strength of schedule within their past 3 victories. But I think that La Huala is going to get Torres outside of round 1 and start to incorporate distance strikes with his beautiful kicks, beautiful punches, his good combinations. He has already displayed to, good striking. We know that, but he has some sneaky submission skills about him as well, which I think that he probably has the better jiu-jitsu of the two. Even though Manuel Torres went out there and sloppily took down Duncan and took his back and choked him out, that seems to me like that's just all brute strength and little technique. It worked. I'm not hating on El Loco Torres. But I think that Bahamondes is going to edge Torres out over 15 minutes. So give me Bahamondes via decision. That's how I see the fight going. But I don't hate you if you need to have this fight a part of your lineups. For me, it's going to be close my eyes, fade the fight in hopes of getting to some other exposure in hopes that it does go 15 minutes. So give me Bahamondes to win the decision.
I haven't hand-built any lineups yet, but just looking at the salaries and some of the fighters I want to get to, I just feel like this will be one of those weeks of hand-building lineups. It's not going to be very difficult, just because of, I don't think you necessarily have to get to the 8,000 fight to be able to come up with a lineup that you truly do like here, just because there are some underdogs that are out there. By the way, Matt, appreciate you becoming a member here of the Fight HQ community here. Appreciate that. I was looking, he was having a little trouble being able to do it on mobile, as I'll have to look into that, but you definitely can do it on the desktop version of YouTube, and we do appreciate that as well there. And of course, we got our Discord channel there as well. Next up, we got another female matchup. We got Yazmin taking on Ketlen. Ketlen a plus 375 betting underdog. Yazmin minus 550. She's 9,200 on DK, $22 on FanDuel. Ketlen 7,000 on DK, $9 on FanDuel. Looking at some of the statistics in terms of these two fighters, Yazmin strikes land per minute 6.26, Souza 4.78. Strikes absorbed per minute, Jauregui 5.12, Souza 2.03. Yazmin, she's 3-1 in the UFC. Her only defeat did come against Denise Gomes last year, which was a loss in 20 seconds. 2 of her 3 UFC wins have come via decision. Of course, Kayla Souza is the former Invicta flyweight champion. She did lose her UFC debut against Irene Silva and is coming off a decision win back in April, Pete.
One of these days, I'm going to have a guest appearance, and my daughter's going to come say hi to everybody and all the supporters and thank you guys for, always supporting the channel. She's going crazy in the background per usual. So I think that this fight's a fantastic matchup for Jauregui, and I could be dead wrong, but I was pretty bullish that Natalia Silva last week was going to make it look easy, and I think that she did. I think that she made it look damn easy. It did not translate into a DFS score, so from a betting standpoint, I feel really comfortable that Jauregui gets it done. From a DFS situation, that's where things get interesting, and I feel like most people naturally will pivot away from her selection and just be like, yeah, I'd rather get to Raul Rosas. I don't fault you. Or I'd rather take a shot against take a shot on the 9,000 fighter in Daniel Zellhuber. And I don't fault you there at all. For me, I just think that there's a tremendous gap in skill here between Jauregui and Souza. I think that 9,200 is completely fair. People aren't going to want to pay it. People are going to be dog chasing and going after Souza at 7,000 because she looked really good against Mark McMahon. Got to tell you, Marnik Man is 0-2 in the UFC and probably one of the easiest, if not the easiest, fight inside the UFC. So is Ketlen Souza that good, or is it really just because Marnik Man is that bad? And for me, I think that it's the latter. I think it's the Marnik Man issue. I think that Ketlen Souza is going to be in for a rude awakening here against Jauregui. I think that there's levels. I think the striking of Jauregui, her hands, she's going to light her up. She's going to hit her with crisp combinations. I think she could actually knock out Souza and make it look easy. She scored 129 in the past against Nunes, 68 against Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes is tough. Lucindo 65. Are we really going to hold 265 and a 68 performance against her? When it's Yazmin Lucindo and Sam Hughes is very tough to deal with and get out of there. So unless you're a fantastic wrestler, I just don't think that you're going to score great against Sam Hughes. So Yazmin Jauregui will finish Souza here. I'm almost positive she's going to finish her. Just because whether it's via KO or it's via takedowns into a submission, I think that Jauregui is just going to separate herself pretty easily in this matchup. Jauregui has a victory over Sam Hughes, who is 4-5 inside the UFC promotion. 0-4 Nunes, so that's not a good look, but she needed a win off of a tough fight against Lucindo, who is 3-1 in the UFC. So Marnik Man for Souza, and those three fighters for Jauregui. Give me Jauregui here at 9,200. That's going to be my stand of the week. I like her a lot. So I hope it translates to a score, and I hope it translates to a sneaky finish. So give me 9,200 Jauregui.
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of that one. And by the way, once again, props on this matchup have not really come out. Maybe some of the smaller books have put some stuff out there, but the big books have not put anything out there, at least when I was looking right here before the show. Next up, we got Edgar Chairez taking on Joshua Van. Of course, this is a matchup that just came together here recently, as Chairez was initially supposed to take on Kevin Borjas in this matchup. He will have a 6-inch reach advantage in this matchup against Van. If you look at that strikes landed per minute, it's definitely a stat that's going to stick out to you if you're over there at UFCstats.com. Edgar, 2.69. Van, 8.55. Strikes absorbed per minute. Chairez, 4.10. Van at 6.34. Chairez is 1-1 and won no contest in the UFC. Of course, that loss, well, it's a guy that not a lot of people are going to beat at this time. Tatsu Taira. His other fight was against, other two fights were against Daniel Lasarda. Of course, Daniel Lasarda, obviously not a marquee opponent there for him. All of Chairez's wins have come via finish, 4 TKO KOs, 7 submissions, and all of his losses have come via decision. Of course, Joshua Van started his UFC run with 3 straight victories before being finished by Charles Johnson there back in July. But, really 2024 for Joshua Van has been a year of canceled matchup. He's had 4 fights this year, Pete, that have been canceled.
Man, I love the willingness to fight, and I love the activity. I really do, or the urge to be active. This fight is one I could be wrong on, and I could be wrong on, and the reason why I could be wrong on it is because we have Joshua Van returning relatively quickly after being knocked out back in July 13th against Charles Johnson. He got hit with an overhand and then hit with an uppercut and planted. He wasn't out cold. It was definitely a flash knockdown, but he was out. You know what I mean? Like, he was out. So I had no problem with the stoppage. If Johnson got on top of him, I think that it would have been inevitable of Johnson getting that finish, which is one of the most surprising finishes and upsets that I've seen within the lighter weight classes, because I'm not a big Charles Johnson guy. I mean, you can ragdoll him, he'll get back to his feet. Some fights you can outwork him. Ode Osbourne beat him, and I have Joshua Van much higher on my list than Ode Osbourne, despite picking Ode Osbourne for this card. We've seen the hand combinations that Joshua Van has. I mean, he digs to the body. He makes all boxing coaches and striking coaches happy, because he does not discriminate. He will punch you in the body. He will punch you in the head. And his hands are sharp. He digs to the liver so well. He picked up a short notice victory over Zellhuber, who really never lived up to success inside the UFC. Scored 80 fantasy points as a 7,200 underdog against Kevin Borjas, who's very, very dangerous and technical in the striking standpoint. Landed 156 significant strikes, had 2 takedowns, had a minute of control time, scored 106 at 9,200. That fight and his debut demonstrate the volume. Against Felipe Bunes, he knocked him out in the second round. Took him down one time, knocked him down, threw 154 strikes, landed 83 significant strikes, scored 135 fantasy points, priced at 8,800. So within all of these fights, you see high volume. Against Charles Johnson, it was relatively low volume based on, his normal line, but he got knocked out within the third round and wasn't able to really go up and put more stats on the page. So I'm interested to see how he looks returning so quickly after getting knocked out. Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to have a golden rule. I'm just not backing guys that got knocked out within 3 months of returning. And we're talking a month and a half, starting to make me scratch my head. And I'm like, oh gosh. But I mean, for him, he's going up against Edgar Chairez, who for the most part is a grappling threat. Chairez is predominantly a grappling threat, very good jiu-jitsu, has some TKO and knockout finishes, a part of his record. But for the most part, it's like not fluky, but he's not a power puncher. Mm-hmm. But if Van's chin isn't 100%, like Chairez could simply knock out Van because, if your brain's not healed, and a lesser opponent could take advantage of it. I think that we're going to see Van be a little wise to the striking of Chairez because it's pretty sloppy. The pick will be Joshua Van, and the strength of schedule is kind of similar, right? Like Edgar Chairez only has a victory over Daniel Lacerda and should have had 2 victories over Daniel Lacerda. Newsflash, Daniel Lacerda is 0-5 in the UFC. Would have been 0-6 despite that no decision because of the weird stoppage. So, I mean, who is he beaten to match up against Joshua Van? And if you look at Joshua Van, like he's beaten some names like Zhumagulov, but Zhumagulov is 1-9 in the 1-9 in the UFC? 1-9 in the UFC, I believe. If I wrote that. No, 1-6 in the UFC. My apologies. Kevin Borjas and Felipe Bunes, 0-2 in the UFC and 0-1 in the UFC. So what are we talking about here? I mean, it's pretty low-level competition between them both. I will have shares of both. This is the one fight that really has me stumped as what happens. I'm going to lean towards the skills of Joshua Van en route to a high-volume, good DFS score. But Chairez has sneaky jiu-jitsu, good finishing instincts, and he could take advantage of a weak chin of Joshua Van at 7,300. So have exposure to both. That's my recommendation. But I'll be picking Joshua Van here at 8,900 en route to a high-volume score.
I think you bring up a ton of great points in there, just having concerns about coming back this quickly. And Joshua is a guy who just doesn't post a lot on Instagram. So,
I was trying to look too.
Yeah. I will tell you this. One of the most popular interviews I've ever done is Joshua Van.
He has a crazy following. He has a crazy following.
I haven't looked in a while, but we ended up putting the video on Facebook. At one point, it had 15,000 views.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That's good for an interview, like for a fighter interview. That's awesome. Yeah,
especially when you're talking about not a main event UFC champion. That just doesn't happen a ton. He has a fan base that is all into everything that he does now. Now, our opening fight of the night, which is kind of interesting that this is the opening fight of the night. Yeah. I would have thought that maybe they would have put him maybe in the featured prelim, maybe even the opening fight of the pay-per-view. So it's kind of interesting the fact the UFC is kicking off this card. By the way, lock right now currently scheduled for 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, 4:30 out there in Vegas. On Saturday, you got Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Richie Lang. Rojas is a minus 950 betting favorite, plus 550 for Richie Lang. He is $6,500 on DK, $8 on FanDuel. Rosas Jr., $9,700 on DK, $23 on FanDuel. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you look at in terms of stats wise, I think you immediately go to how does Arichi Lang do against stopping the takedowns here. And looking at his UFC fights, he's been taken down 12 times in his UFC career, taken down 5 times by Cody Durden, 3 times by Jay Perrin, and then Johnny Munoz took him down 4 times there. Of course, when you look at strikes land per minute, it's not going to be a great number when you're talking about Raul Rosas Jr. just because of his, he's a guy that's going to work on the ground, 1.12 strikes land per minute. Arichi Lang, 5.3 run. Takedown average, Rosas Jr., 4.39. Arichi Lang, 1.45. Arichi Lang does have a 58% takedown defense in terms of that one. Rosas has won back-to-back fights since dropping that decision there last year against Christian Rodriguez, and all of Rosas Jr.'s wins in the UFC have come in the first or second round, Pete.
Yeah, so I think that this is a compelling matchup, and it's an appropriate one for a prodigy to be matched, correctly. I think that they're doing a very good job of making sure that he's taking baby steps within his career, not going outside of his wheelhouse. Like, you can't be fighting C-Rod, like that fight it was just too much too soon. Picking up a victory over Jay Perrin, victory over Terrence Mitchell, victory over Ricky Turcios. You could poke holes in all of those guys, right? Like, you could poke holes in all of those guys. If you look at it, Ricky Turcios never materialized into what we all thought he was going to be, which is kind of odd. I was very surprised that he didn't turn into what we saw in The Ultimate Fighter or in the finale. He was 2-2 in the UFC. You have Terrence Mitchell 0-2 in the UFC, and then you have Jay Perrin 0-3 in the UFC. So, not the best strength of schedule, but I think it's appropriate for a guy that's so young and new within his career. Going up against Arichi Lang, I have question marks about Arichi Lang, and the reason I have question marks about Arichi Lang is because of the wins. The wins that he has, it's just like this. I mean, Cameron Else, Owen winless in the UFC. Jay Perrin, winless in the UFC. Munoz, 2-4 in the UFC. So it's just like weak strength of schedule for both of them as far as who they've beaten. And you don't like seeing Arichi Lang getting taken down by some of his opponents. Like 5 times against Cody Durden. Okay. Cody Durden doesn't have the submission skills of Raul Rosas Jr. to capitalize on a good position and submit him. I mean, how can I say that when Cody Durden submitted Matt Schnell last week? But I still think there's levels to the submission game. I think that was an opportunistic submission. I think that Raul Rosas Jr.'s jiu-jitsu is so much better than Cody Durden, even though Durden's gotten better at it. So 5 takedowns against Cody Durden, that's troublesome. Jay Perrin taking you down 3 times, that's troublesome to me. That is troublesome to me. Perrin likes to strike. He will initiate some takedowns, but usually he's not the better wrestler of the two. So for him to land 3 takedowns against Arichi Lang is a little concerning. And then Johnny Munoz does his best work in the grappling department, but landing 4 takedowns and basically doing nothing else did not win him the fight. I think that Raul Rosas Jr. gets takedowns eventually. I think that Arichi Lang being a part of Fight Ready will help his takedown defense, at least his initial takedown defense. It's the chain wrestling that could become a problem. And then it's the jiu-jitsu is where the real problem is. I mean, Raul Rosas Jr. is fantastic at taking the back. I could see him taking the back and submitting Arichi Lang with a rear naked choke. It's a pretty common way for Raul Rosas Jr. to pick up a victory. My issue here, Jason, is he's striking on the outside, right? Maybe he attempts some takedowns, doesn't get it. When he finally does get a takedown, that's all she wrote. That's all he needed. Scores 106, let's call it. 106 at 9,700, I just don't think is necessary, right? Same way he did against Jay Perrin. Knocking out Terrence Mitchell in quick fashion, scored him 133. I don't necessarily see that happening. Ricky Turcios is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So the fact that, Raul Rosas Jr. went to the second round with Turcios isn't a bad look at all. He scored 111. I think that Turcios' submission defense is clearly better than Richie Lang, and that's why it resulted in a delayed finish in the second round, and Raul Rosas Jr. still scored 111. So I think that, Rosas may not get takedowns, right out the gate, but once he gets one, maybe two, that's literally probably all she wrote. And if Richie Lang is able to survive, then we could look at, Rosas breaking the slate with high volume takedowns that just don't stop. He's not going to stop until he gets a finish or until time expires. So I think Rosas Jr. is a very, very safe play. Same with Jauregui, even more so. But I think that the score, it's an interesting spot because it's a spend up. It's 100 points all day. It's just if it's barely 100 or just over, it might not be necessary at that price point.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last week when we were talking about Bulgarian. He ended up getting 125 points, but I think some people were definitely nervous that maybe he wasn't going to get that score, but it just was just such a dominating victory in terms of that. And I think I do like Rosas Jr. to go out there and get the win. Of course, if you do have any questions, be sure to line that right up now up in our YouTube chat or also in Discord. We're going to answer those questions here momentarily. We're going to get into our straight up fight picks here in event. Give me end still, Sugar Sean.
Sugar Sean.
I'm gonna go with the champion of the co-main event, even though more times than not, usually we get at least one new champion crowned. I think Alexa Grasso gets the job done.
Yeah, Alexa Grasso for me.
This is a fight that part of me thinks Ortega gets it done, but you know what? I just say, you know what? I think there's a recent UFC match that's went with this fight. I think Diego Lopes does get it done, but I think it's by decision.
Yeah, Diego Lopes via decision as well.
I'll go Zellhuber just because of the length.
Okay, I'm going to take an underdog shot on Ribovics here at 7,200.
I don't feel good going either way on this matchup.
Did I sell you? Did I sell you on O'Day?
You sold me on O'Day. I'll go with O'Day Osbourne, but man, don't feel good. I don't feel good at either side of this matchup.
Watch O'Day get finished like the easiest ever. I mean, it could happen, right? Like, we know that he's so fluky. The Terrence Mitchell comp is one of the best comps out there, so credit to you on that. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to O'Day.
Next up, I will go with Irene Aldana.
All right, I'm going to take another underdog shot with Norma Dumont.
Next up, I will go. I'm going to go Bahamondes.
Yeah, I'm going Bahamondes squeaks it out.
Give me Yazmin.
Yazmin?
I will go. I go Van, but I think there's definitely concern there about returning so quickly after a knockout.
Agreed with you. I'll go Van.
And I'll go Rosas Jr.
Rosas Jr. for me.
All right, get some questions from Discord here. Let me get to the first questions that came in here on the show. Let's see here. Best leverage plays. As I kind of look at the salaries here, I almost feel like you got to be looking at between Zellhuber, Yazmin, and Van as your leverage plays this week.
I mean, I think that despite Van getting knocked out, he's probably going to carry some ownership because of the box scores of 135, 106, and 80, and just the significant strikes totals. I could be wrong on that, but that's my take. I think that Jauregui and Zellhuber are probably the top-end leverage plays that make the most sense to me, and probably on the entire slate.
When you look at takedown upside, I mean, I think it's very clear here. Rosas and Merab.
Agreed.
I think you got those Shevchenko in there as well as another great upside there. Ranking the 9K options here. So we got Zellhuber at 9,000. We got Jauregui at 9,200. And then we got Rosas Jr. at 9,700. To me, I would go, I think Rosas is number 1, Yazmin 2, Zellhuber 3.
I think DK got it right for once.
Best quick win bonus fighter.
I mean, Raul Rosas Jr. could do it so easy. Mm-hmm. Quick win. I mean, dude, we're talking a minute.
Could
O'Day.
That's the fight I was looking at. That's the fight you could look at potentially as one.
He's
going to
come out there crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Value plays under 8K. Obviously, you look at the underdogs in the main event, co-main event. Both of them, to me, have got value there. Pete, you talked about Esteban, you've talked about Ode, you've talked about Dumont. I think when you're looking at just from a salary saver underneath AK, it's hard to argue with the underdogs in main event, co-main event.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would agree with you. Shevchenko at 7,900 is going to be an easy click for many people, carries a ton of ownership. We better hope Grasso separates herself pretty quickly, because 7,900, so much ownership's is going to be like a train of lineups that just climb the rankings. And if you do not have Shevchenko, it's going to be it's not going to be good. It's not going to be pleasant. Bahamondes at 8,000. Not really in love with that fight. I think the best way is to just dance around and get Torres into the second and third round. And it's the underdogs I talked about of Ode, Ribovics, and Dumont that are kind of my my go-tos, because I'm not big on Merab Dvalishvili this week. But if you disagree with Jason and I, no problem. Get to Merab, especially in a 150. There's no way in a 150 max I would be avoiding Merab because of his tremendous ceiling.
Core 3 on DraftKings. I think for me, I think I look at starting with Sean O'Malley. That to me is where I would build the roster. If it's a cash game lineup, I'm forcing in Raul at 9,700, and then of course I'm going to look for a little bit of a value play. If I'm looking for a value play, it might be Norma Dumont.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking for a value play, women's MMA, is pretty close. We've seen her look more consistent than Ode Osbourne. I think Ode Osbourne's a GPP play for sure. If I had to go 3 for core 3, it'd be O'Malley, it'd be Rosas, and it would be Grasso. I mean, that's chalk, but I still think it's pretty affordable. I mean, you got 9,700, you got 8,300, and 8,500. That's not horrible.
Okay, we'll go over to Sam's questions here. We already kind of talked about top core there in terms of that one. So top inside the distance fights and fighters. I think you got to look at Sean O'Malley as a fighter, get the stoppage there, especially if he's just able to pick him apart from the outside. Other ones that I would look at, I think Rodriguez Osbourne, it's got volatility written on both sides of it, but I can see a finish coming in that one. I would say Chairez and Van. I think and Rosas and Richie Lang are fights that I think have got a good probability of ending in a finish.
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Top value plays. Is it Esteban Ribovics?
I mean, I think pound for pound, salary for salary, I think at 7,200, it's just probably the best value from a wide stance, because you see Prado against Zellhuber. That fight happened. And I think the recency bias has inflated the Zellhuber line. And there's similarities between Prado and Ribovics. So I think that's why people are expecting the same type of fight. But I think the value is definitely like pound for pound, salary for salary. I think it is Ribovics.
When you look at best decision odds out there, I think I look at the co-main event. I think that's the one slot you can go to distance there. The Jason Pete special, give me Raul Rosas Jr. Then we kind of talked about Torres and Bahamondes not necessarily being something to prioritize this week. Road to the Man Series 5.5. So we only got 10
like that
fights
number,
here.
Man. That's a good number. Oof. I think that's a good number.
I could go either way on that one. I really could.
I mean, I could see if he said 6.5. I would say under all day long.
Yeah, no doubt about that. We'll get into some YouTube questions that have come in here throughout the show. Of course, we appreciate everyone that does send in a question and checks out the show, whether it's on YouTube or on the podcasting platforms here. Scary Creation, he goes, with only 10 fights, do either you do 150s? What if we lose a fight? If you lose a fight, I really don't like going into a 150 just because it's going to be Chop City. I think if you're creating that type of you're going into an optimizer like a Fancy Crunch or something along those lines, you got to put in some factors just to try to create some differences in your lineups.
Yeah, I think number one clearly is salary. Number 2 is a losing fighter scoring well in a loss. Number 3 is a stack. I think on a short slate like that, like you have to hope for some duds. Like, yeah, some of these underdogs can come through, but only gets 60 points. How many times have we seen fighters in losses get north of 60 points? And that's where a stack or a losing fighter that's unowned sneak into the optimal lineup because it allowed you to create a unique and a high salary, lineup where you got all the studs in it. So I think that's 3 ways to get different. 10 fights. We better not lose a fight. I think that if, Dana White lost a fight on this card, it would be detrimental much more than the regular.
Oh, no question about it here. Sammy says, we'll skip Merab in a 20 max question mark. I would not skip Merab in a 20 max. No. I mean, I think you want to
at least 5 lineups of Merab all day long in a 20 max.
Yeah, because if he wins, he will break the slate. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Sam, DK contest, if I don't get it up today because I got some meetings after this, but I'll definitely get that thing up there tomorrow. And then Samuel says, was there any time in the good old days of 10-fight cards? No. Yeah, when the UFC roster was not like 800 fighters, yes, there was 10-fight cards back in the day. I think I can remember there being like 8-fight cards back in the day. But the UFC roster is just so massive at this point that they really have to put that together, these 12 and 13 fight cards to honor these contracts, because they do have to offer fighters 3 fights in a calendar year. So that's just based on the contracts there. But I'll be up in Detroit on Saturday, so I'll probably most likely be watching this on my phone. I'll be ordering on that ESPN app, watching it on the phone. How are you going to take this one in, Pete?
Yeah, I'm probably just going to kick it at home and enjoy the fights per usual. I hate going out for the fights. But yeah, I'm excited to watch this card. And credit to your Bucks, man. Congrats. You guys looked great last week.
Yeah, it was a great game. Go get to Detroit on Saturday. I think I'm going to hit the Tigers game on early
sweet
Saturday evening. So yeah, that's one of those things of living this travel life. When you get a chance to go check out a sporting event or maybe a festival, whatnot. That's something we really try to do. One of the things I'll never forget. One of the best things we ever did was, this was probably like 2016. We went to a festival out in San Francisco. It was all acoustic, headlined by Metallica.
Oh my God, I would have been in heaven. I love Metallica. That was
and it was
awesome.
It was all types of music. I mean, it was country artists, it was pop, it was R&B, it was rock, country, it was everything. It was honestly one of the best concerts I've ever been to. And I always say this as someone who I worked in radio for 10 plus years, saw many bands, many performers come through. The ones that could sing acoustic, you knew were really damn good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's up here at Mohegan Sun, you definitely can tell what the studios kind of help out and who's a great live performer. Live performances are especially acoustic ones are unique, and you definitely give them credit where credit is due.
Yeah. So, of course, as always, we appreciate everyone who tuned into the show, whether you watch this on YouTube or if you're listening to us on the podcast platforms. Of course, new shows do come out every week. I'm pretty sure there's a UFC show next week, but really haven't looked ahead. I'm just going to be honest.
I don't think there is. I think there's a week off. Yeah. Well, and that's me just spitballing right now. I have no idea. I'm just guessing that they're going to take a week off from this Noche disaster.
Well, I do know we have a Bellator card on Saturday over there in London. It is a god-awful Bellator card, by the way. They lost their title fight between Edwin and Edwards, now headlined by McCourt and Collins. There actually has been a ton of drug testing that's been happening on that event here. Our next UFC event, Pete, you are right. Our next UFC event is September the 28th. That'll be over in Paris, headlined by Renato Moicano and Benoit Saint Denis.
Oh shit! Damn, that's a fight.
Yeah, then your co-main event, William Gomez versus Joe Anderson Brito.
Co-main event.
That's the way it's listed on the ESPN calendar.
Oh my God!
The co-main event has to be Imavov and Allen. No, that has to be the co-main.
Gomez is in the co-main.
The way they have it labeled on
stop it, Jason.
On the ESPN website. Let me just
imagine Gomez is in a co-main event.
Even on UFC stats, that's listed as a second fight.
Stop it. Stop. That's one of the worst co-main event placements ever. Is he French? I mean, is that?
Yeah, Gomez is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
that would be the only reason that's co-main event. But Brandon Allen and Nasser Imavov should be co-main event.
How the hell is not that?
Even on UFC.com, Gomez Brito is labeled as a second fight. Allen Imavov, which look, you can very well make a legitimate argument that the winner of that matchup, is next in line after Sean Strickland.
100%. That better be the co-main event. I'm looking right now. What does UFC Stats have?
UFC
Stats has Gomez and Brito.
Dude.
Okay. On that note, we're out of here because that was horrendous. Thank you guys so much for the support, whether it's today, a year ago, a week ago, a couple years ago. We appreciate it. It's gone a long way. If you can continue to support us, hit that like button. We try to get over 150 likes every show. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel out. If you have friends that are in the MMA betting or MMA DFS, into the game, spread the word and let them know about our channel. We really appreciate it. Join the free Discord below. Send us those screenshots when you guys win big, and we love seeing it.
And of course, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Fight HQ podcast. We'll be back here in 2 weeks. We'll get you ready for that card there in Paris. Of course, if you got any questions, you can leave a comment here on YouTube or you hit that Discord channel. So that's going to do it for this episode of Fight HQ.